Greetings. This is Brother Eli. Welcome to Bible Truth Revealed. This channel is dedicated to exposing the lies of Christianity and revealing biblical truth. On this channel, we worship and serve the Most High God of Israel only. This teaching is entitled, The Reasons for Sexual Immorality in the Christian Church. That is, the reasons for sexual immorality in the Christian Church. It is a well-known fact that sexual immorality is rampant in the Christian Church. In this teaching, we will examine the book of 1 Corinthians in the so-called New Testament to discover why the Christian church is plagued with this problem. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18, in the King James Version of the Christian Bible. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18. It says, "Flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body." There are many such warnings in the Christian Bible, yet Christians continue to engage in fornication, adultery, rape, pedophilia, and all other kinds of sexual abominations. By the end of this teaching, it will become clear why sexual immorality is rampant in the Christian church. On www.vividchristianity.com, which is a website dedicated to, quote-unquote, teaching Christians how to live a vivid Christian life, there's an article entitled, "Sex Outside of Marriage is Not Always a Sin." Again, sex outside of marriage is not always a sin. Quote 1 says this: "Oral sex and the use of sex toys and touching or fondling, whether clothed or not, don't involve sexual intercourse, and therefore they are not sex outside of marriage. They are not sinful between two unmarried consenting adults who are not in exclusive relationships." This means that unmarried church members can have oral sex, use sex toys, and touch or fondle one another's naked bodies because, according to many Christians, these things are not sinful. In fact, a Christian once told me that he only has oral and anal sex with the woman in his church because these things are not sinful. You can't make this stuff up. For a thorough refutation of this foolishness, please listen to my teaching entitled, "What is Good Sexual Health?" That is, what is good sexual health? Quote 2 from vividchristianity.com says, "There are certain commands concerning sex in the Old Covenant, but it's very important to understand the distinction between commands under the Old Covenant and commands under the New Covenant, because the commands under the Old Covenant do not apply to anyone today." Again, the commands under the Old Covenant, also known as the Old Testament, do not apply to anyone today. In a moment, we are going to examine one of the commands under the Old Covenant, as Christians call it. But first, let's examine what the Most High had to say about his commands. Leviticus chapter 18, verses 1 to 2, verses 4 to 5, verse 20, and verse 29. I'm reading Leviticus chapter 18, verses 1 to 2, 4 to 5, 20, and 29. And I will be reading from the Brenton Septuagint translation. It says, "And the Most High spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and thou shalt say to them, I am the Most High." Verse 4, "Ye shall observe my judgments, and shall keep my ordinances, and shall walk in them. I am the Most High, your God. So ye shall keep all my ordinances, and all my judgments, and do them. Which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the Most High, your Elohim." The Most High, which is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, commanded his holy people, the children of Israel, to keep his commandments. Christians reject the commandments of the Most High, and they go as far as to say that none of the commandments that the Most High gave to the children of Israel apply to anyone today. Now let's read an example of one of these commandments in Leviticus chapter 18 that most Christian pastors refuse to keep. Verse 20, it says, "And thou shalt not lie with thy neighbor's wife, to defile thyself with her." Verse 29, "For whosoever shall do any of these abominations, the soul that do them shall be destroyed from among their people." This is why Christians reject the words of the Most High, because the Most High takes sexual immorality very seriously, and he severely punishes those who commit this egregious sin. On the other hand, adultery is so commonly practiced in the Christian church that it is even expected. In fact, when Christian pastors are caught sleeping with other men's wives, they can simply say they are sorry, and they may even receive a standing ovation. Here is an example.
Reverend O. Jermaine Simmons. Reverend O. Jermaine Simmons, a much respected pastor at Jacob Chapel Baptist Church, is found in a compromising position with a married congregant right in her home. It sounds like something out of a dramatic movie, but this was no fiction. It happened on January 17th, 2017. A report from the Tallahassee Police Department acquired by the Christian Post said Simmons, 37, was caught in bed with Claynisha Stevens, 34, by the woman's husband, Benjamin Stevens III. Both Claynisha and Benjamin are his parishioners. The frightened pastor fled the couple's home, naked without waiting to see what would happen. Simmons ran out of the apartment naked and hopped a privacy fence behind some shrubs, the report said. But his car keys and his clothes were inside the house with the woman and her enraged husband. A parishioner gave the pastor a ride from the apartment, and police later helped him retrieve his clothes and car. The woman's husband, Benjamin, was slapped with aggravated assault charges. Meanwhile, Simmons found himself facing his congregation, his guilt laid bare. With a heartfelt apology, he asked for forgiveness, an appeal that was met with a standing ovation.
Christianity is a lawless religion. It rejects the commandments of the Most High in favor of the opinions of man. And for those who think that the video we watched a moment ago is an isolated case, Here is a short list of well-known Christian pastors who have all been found guilty of sexual immorality.
What do all of these men have in common? Bishop Eddie Long, Earl Polk, Jim Baker, Bill Hybels, Carl Lentz, Jimmy Swaggart, Ravi Zacharias, Jerry Falwell Jr., Jeremy Foster, John Gray, Tullian Tivigen, Billy Graham's grandson, if you do not know, and pastor of Florida Megachurch, Brian Houston, pastor of Hillsong, and more recently, Matt Chandler. All of these men have either confessed having some sort of sexual impropriety or they were accused of it, so much so that they have had to at least admit to that, and where there is smoke, there is often fire.
If the leaders of the Christian church are so steeped in sexual immorality, of course those who follow them will also follow their lead by partaking in sexual immorality. This is common sense. Christians do not follow the laws of the Most High. They follow their sexually immoral pastors. This is why sexual immorality is rampant in the Christian church. Most Christians believe that sexual immorality was rampant in the Christian church from the very beginning. And this is why the so-called Apostle Paul wrote the book of 1 Corinthians. It was to address sexual immorality in the Christian church. Other Christians may claim that this happened 2,000 years ago. It is obvious that nothing has changed because sexual immorality is still rampant in the Christian church today. Let's carefully examine the book of 1 Corinthians so we can discover 4 more reasons why Christians refuse to stop committing sexual sins even after reading and understanding 1 Corinthians. Reason number 1, a corrupt foundation. We'll find this in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 11 to 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 11 to 15. For other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jeepers Creepers. The foundation of Christianity is that an innocent man died for the sins of guilty people so that guilty people do not have to face the consequences of their own sins. This is why Christians have no sense of personal accountability and no fear of the Most High. They think that their sins have already been paid for and that no matter what they do, they will be okay if they believe in Jeepers Creepers. Listen to this madness.
Christ died to show God's righteousness at the present time so that he could be both just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus, though he be adulterer, murderer, liar, child molester. If that doesn't work, I'm out of here. Christianity is over if that doesn't work. That's the heart of Christianity. And there's nothing but horrible injustices in the world that will never be set right. But if that works, we've got the best news in all the world for the worst people in all the world.
Christians say the most ridiculous things. I once heard a Christian say that Jesus died for his sins. So if he doesn't sin, it would mean that Jesus died in vain. You cannot make this stuff up. For a thorough refutation of this nonsense, please listen to my teaching entitled, Why Jesus Did Not Die for Your Sins. That is, why Jesus did not die for your sins. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, I shall continue from verse 12. It says, Now if any man build upon this foundation, gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble, every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire, and the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. What does this mean? In Barnes' notes on the Bible, this is what it says about this verse. What every man has built on this foundation shall be seen, whether he has held truth or error, whether he has had correct views of piety or false, and this is the important bit, whether what he has done has been what he should have done or not. Again, whether what he has done has been what he should have done or not. This means that on the day of judgment, the works of every Christian will be revealed. Whether they did what was right, such as brushing their teeth or feeding the poor, or what was wrong, such as committing adultery or sexually molesting children. Here is an example of something that is undeniably wrong, but nonetheless, it is very common in the Christian church.
For the past 2 decades, the Roman Catholic Church has been in the spotlight, plagued by a child abuse problem it hasn't resolved. It's been a global reckoning, spanning dozens of countries.
We exposed the abuse within the church and their response, particularly by some of the bishops who were engaged in the conspiracy and cover-up, was to go spend parishioner money to hire lobbyists to try and make it harder for survivors to confront their abusers in court.
And using top lawyers to resist the disclosure of documents.
We've got the best news in all the world for the worst people in all the world.
Any Israelite who continues to attend the Christian church after learning these things will be held accountable for turning a blind eye to this abomination. The righteous remnant of Israel must want nothing to do with the religion of our Christian slave masters. Verse 14 says, If any man's work abide, which he has built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. This means that Christians will be rewarded for good works, such as brushing their teeth and feeding the poor. Verse 15, If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire. This means that Christians will suffer loss for bad works such as committing adultery or sexually molesting children, but they themselves shall be saved. When the leaders of the Christian church think that they cannot lose their salvation, is it any surprise that there is so much sexual immorality in the Christian church? Naturally, if an immoral person, such as a Christian pastor or priest, thinks that he or she will be saved no matter what he or she does, that person will commit immoral acts. That is just their nature. So, the first reason for the rampant sexual immorality in the Christian church is that Christianity is built on a corrupt foundation. Reason number 2, double standards. We'll find this in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 2 to 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 2 to 3 in the King James Version of the Christian Bible says this: Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. So it's a requirement for those in charge of the church to be found faithful, trustworthy. But, but with me, this is by the fake apostle Paul, he said, with me, it is a very small thing that I should be judged of you, or of any man's judgment. In other words, no one can judge me. Yeah, I judge not mine own self. He doesn't even judge his own self. But we will discover soon that he had no problem judging other people. This is a double standard. Now listen to this wicked Christian pastor telling the church that only God can judge them.
Only God can judge me. I want you to look at your neighbor right in their face and say it with your chest. Say, neighbor, only God can judge me. Look at your other neighbor and say it like a Tupac. Say, other neighbor. Oh, neighbor, I know you sit next to me. But don't be judging me, because only God can judge you.
Knowing that Christians have rejected the commands of the Most High, and they insist that only God can judge them, there should be no surprise that the Christian church is full of sexual immorality. Christians claim that only God can judge them, but they don't realize that God will use His laws to judge them. If you reject and break the laws of the Most High, you are guaranteed to be found guilty when you are judged using the laws of the Most High. And you are also guaranteed to be destroyed. It is really that simple. Reason number 3, a culture of hypocrisy. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, I will read verses 1 to 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 1 to 3 reads thus: It is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles, that one should have his father's wife. It is reported commonly means that it has always been a common thing for fornication to be practiced in the Christian church. It is a place where sexually immoral people gather to do sexually immoral things. In fact, the Christian church is and has always been worse than the rest of the community. This is why it says, such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles. The Christian church was worse than the community around them, and the Christian church continues to be worse than the community around them. Nothing has changed. Now, it is true that sexual immorality also runs rampant, not just in Christianity, but in Islam and Judaism, and among other religions. However, in this teaching, we are focusing on Christianity. So let's not get distracted pointing fingers at the other religions. Verse 2. And ye are puffed up, that means full of pride, and have not rather mourned, that he that hath done this deed meaning sleeping with his father's wife, might be taken away from among you. For I verily, as absent in body, but present in spirit, have judged already, as though I were present, concerning him that has so done this deed. So here we see that after telling the church that they cannot judge him, the so-called Apostle Paul has the audacity to judge this person. This is evidence of the culture of hypocrisy in the Christian church. This is telling us that hypocrisy has been part of the Christian culture from the very beginning. For evidence that the so-called Apostle Paul admitted to being a false apostle, please listen to my teaching entitled, Was Paul Really a False Apostle? That is, was Paul really a false apostle? Reason number 4 for the sexual immorality in the Christian church: the veil of secrecy. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 1 says this: Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unjust and not before the saints? Dare you do that? This verse is used by sexual predators in the Christian church to prevent their victims from reporting crimes to the police. They say, we are all Christians. Let's just talk about it among ourselves. Or, you must forgive your brother his trespasses, or God won't forgive you. And the list goes on. There is no accountability. It's all about forgive, forget, and move on. Listen closely.
Jeannie says she was sexually abused from infancy until she was 7 in California.
Your abuser, was it somebody within the organization?
Yeah, they were an elder and also a family member.
At the time, she denied it was happening. But after another family member shared the same man was abusing them, Jeannie's dad went to the ministers in their area.
So all that was done to this man was he could no longer have meetings in his home.
To my understanding, that's accurate.
He was never charged.
Correct. There's no accountability.
It's all about, forgive, forget, and move on.
This forgive and forget nonsense comes directly from the so-called New Testament. Let's have a look at it in Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 22. Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 22 says this: Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Jesus saith unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. 70 times 7 is 490 times. Victims of sexual abuse in the Christian church are often told to forgive their abusers 490 times. You will find no such nonsense in the Holy Scriptures, which Christians call the Old Testament. The Most High does not require us to forgive rapists, child molesters, and other scumbags. According to the Holy Scriptures, anyone who commits intentional sins will be punished for those sins. Let's read about this in Numbers chapter 15, verses 30 and 31. I'm reading Numbers chapter 15, verses 30 and 31 in the Brenton Septuagint translation. It says, And whatsoever soul, either of the natives or of the strangers, shall do anything with a presumptuous hand, that means intentionally, he will provoke the Most High, that soul shall be cut off from his people, for he has set at naught the word of the Most High, and broken his commands. That soul shall be utterly destroyed. His sin is upon him. This is exactly why most Christians claim that the commands of the Most High do not apply to anyone today. There are wicked, lawless people that do not want to be held accountable for their sins. But the Most High said that they will utterly be destroyed because their sins are upon them. The fake God of the so-called New Testament is a pushover. This is why most Christians are pushovers as well. It should be clear to anyone that reads the Holy Scriptures, which Christians call the Old Testament, and then reads the piece of garbage called the New Testament, that the Most High is not the God of the so-called New Testament. The Most High is a God of judgment and justice. He punishes sins, whereas the fake God of the New Testament, so-called, is a pushover. For evidence of this fact, please listen to my teaching entitled Exposing the Christian New Testament. That is, exposing the Christian New Testament. Some Christians will claim that 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 1 is not talking about sexual immorality. So let's read a few more verses from the same chapter so I can demonstrate that the subject has not changed. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, I will read verses 9 to 10 and verse 18. That 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 9 to 10 and verse 18. It reads, Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, so we're still talking about fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, this is sexual immorality, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God. These are the people that verse 1 is talking about. Dare any of you go to law, meaning the police, having a matter against fornicators, adulterers, child molesters, and so forth? You better not. Christians are encouraged to resolve these issues privately within the church. This is one of the reasons why the Christian church is plagued with rapists, child molesters, and other sexual abusers. They know it is very unlikely for their crimes to be reported to the police. The veil of secrecy is so thick that unless you actively go looking for evidence of sexual abuse, you will not know that your local church is just as immoral as the Roman Catholic Church.
Until you're willing to go out there and get the information for yourself, you're not going to see it.
What information specifically?
How much sexual abuse is happening, how much just immorality and lying, how much unwillingness to change, to put some protections into place against some of this abuse that's happened.
Now let's read verse 18, which is the verse that we started this teaching with. flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. This sounds good on the surface, but after you teach someone that the law of the Most High is done away with, why would they care about sinning against their own body? My body, my choice, remember? If Christians don't care about what the Most High has to say, they certainly don't care about unwanted pregnancies, sexually transmitted diseases, broken families, or any of the other consequences of sexually immoral behavior. Christianity is a joke. Telling Christians to flee fornication in one breath, then telling them in another breath that nobody can judge them except God, or that their salvation is guaranteed regardless of their works, is a recipe for disaster. This confusion is the main reason for the rampant sexual immorality in the Christian church. If the Christian church had not rejected the laws of the Most High, it wouldn't be such a vile, sexually immoral place that has become the laughing stock of the rest of the world. In conclusion, Christians give lip service to the so-called New Testament passages that say they should flee fornication, but as they are convinced that only God can judge them, or that their salvation is guaranteed no matter what they do, they always find themselves disobeying the very words they claim to believe. On the other hand, those of us who serve the Most High only and keep His commandments must maintain a level of sexual purity and morality that can truly be considered righteous. And with that I say, Salam.